go chasing miracles, no. That's not how my story goes. You could be my hero before I let you go.
So here it is, the video that you've all been waiting for. Now I appreciate your patience with this one. This has not been an easy video to make, so make sure you give it a thumbs up if you do enjoy it, and comment below if there's anything I don't quite specify which you'd like to know, because this has been a big accumulation of a large chunk of my life. I've tried to go into as much detail as I possibly can with every aspect, every decision, every little first-hand insight that I can give. Like I said, that's a long period of time, so hit me in the comments and I'll try to respond to as many comments as I can, so let's do it. Our story begins in the year 1991 in a small country called New Zealand. I was born in a city called Auckland and I grew up here for most of my childhood. Unfortunately, my dad passed away when I was only 2 years old, so that was pretty shitty, but at the time, you know, I was only 2, so I couldn't really comprehend it, and I grew up not really understanding what I was missing out on. It's kind of like now that I'm older, I look back and I kind of realize at 5 years old I went to school like any other kids and grew up a pretty normal childhood just without a father. I remember I was a very shy kid. I didn't have much confidence, and this lasted my whole childhood. I can remember the one thing that kind of got me some confidence was when I started playing hockey. It's pretty random sports and it wasn't one that many kids played, but for some reason I just got really good at it. Like, it was just one thing. I had my stick and my ball and I could just practice at home. I finally got good at something for the first time in my life, so that's kind of random, but there's that. I remember when I first became aware of my physical appearance. It was around the age of 12 when for the first time ever I got shirtless photos taken of myself. When we went on a holiday to Fiji. And I just remember, it's so funny looking at these photos now, guys. I thought I was a beast. I remember this photo right here. I'm literally tensing on the bed because I knew the photo was getting taken. And this was the first time I kind of realized that I could actually tense my muscles to look bigger. So it's kind of, it's pretty cringe, but it's kind of funny as well. So at the age of 13, my mum and I moved out to Tuakau. I started boarding school at King's College in Auckland. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship for basically not having enough money to pay for boarding. I started boarding school just as a little kid that, you know, like I said, had no confidence. So it was in this year 2005 which I got snapped up into rowing somehow, and this was my first real taste of fitness. So at the age of 13 I weighed in at 55 kgs. It was at this age that I decided I wanted to be big and I wanted to be jacked. There was a guy in our school's first 15 rugby team. His name was Randall Kamea. He looks better than any bodybuilder I'd ever seen. I just remember it was those biceps and calves that really stood out to me. So from the first time seeing him, I decided I needed biceps and I needed calves. So because of that, these were the first features I worked on with my own physique. I started doing standing calf raises every single day and bicep curls with a pair of second-hand weights which I bought off Trade Me, because I was too young for a gym membership. So in between a year of standing calf raises, doing bicep curls on the weekends and whenever I got to go home for school holidays, because I wasn't allowed the weights at school, I started to make some gains. My calves actually developed really nicely and I got some small little peaks on my biceps. I rowed for the next 3 years at school. As you can see this photo here, I'm 16 years old, and I think it was around this age I would have been weighing in at about 60 kgs. It was around this time of my life that rowing was everything. I was doing so much rowing, I couldn't even eat enough to really gain size as much as I tried to. I started getting in the gym a little bit more around this time, but like I said, with the rowing, I could just never put on size because I was always so active. I was unable to get in more calories than I was exerting through my exercise. So this was pretty much the story of my life for my 4 years rowing at school. I gymmed on the sides, but I could never make any substantial gains. It wasn't until my last year of college, when I was almost 18 years old, that I could finally focus on going to the gym as much as I wanted to. So it was this year that my physique noticeably started to change and I slowly put on some weight. By the end of the year, at 18 years old, I was weighing in at 68 kgs. So I feel like this was the age where I kind of had that foundation for my physique. So in the year 2010, I went down to university. I went to Wellington for the first half of the year and Dunedin for the second half of the year. I stayed in hostels and I had a lot of time on my hands to train. Maybe not quite as much as I wanted because I was playing rugby as well, so In that first half of the year, I remember slowly getting my weight up, hitting around 72 to 74 kgs for the first time in my life. During this time, I was training about 4 days a week as I was playing rugby, and we had 2 training sessions a week and a game every Saturday. So in the second half of the year, I went down to Dunedin, where I stopped playing rugby and I could hit the gym a lot more. I was hitting it about 5 to 6 times a week. I was not training very well. I would never do any more than 3 sets on an exercise. Mentally, for some reason, I thought 3 was like the golden number, 3 sets of an exercise. It's not until like later I realized that you want to be hitting like 5 to 6 sets, hitting that volume on really effective exercises. But at the time, I guess I just didn't have the knowledge. There was no social media like there is today, where you kind of have people to look up to. It was kind of word of mouth, and unless you were lucky enough to fall in the right circles, that knowledge was something you didn't really get. I remember this whole year I was trying to eat as much as I could in the hostels, smashing cheese toasted sandwiches all the time, toast all the time, and 2 for $6 McChickens at our local McDonald's in Dunedin when I had a special card. By the end of the year, I had finally reached 77 kgs for the first time ever, and I couldn't believe it. That was my late at night weight though. Realistically, my morning weight would have been around 74 to 75 kgs. So in 2011, it was my first year flatting out of the hostel, and it was this year that I decided to take my bulk to a whole nother level. After a whole summer of landscaping to try and save up for my car, I was down to 70 kgs. Pretty much back to what I started when I left school, and I couldn't believe it. Honestly, I was just so upset. But I've been landscaping 5 days a week for about 10 weeks just to save up for my car, and I also saved up for huge bags of protein because I started my very first business called Athlete's Choice Protein, from which I pretty much just bagged up Fonterra whey and sold it individually in bags which held about 1 kg each. It wasn't a very successful business venture, but I got to have free protein for myself. So training was my main focus for this year. In between drinking and partying, I committed to a ridiculous dirty bulk and finally started to get some very good results from training with a group of powerlifters and like-minded individuals who had come into my life. My training consisted a lot of strength training, 5x5 on big compound movements, a lot of deadlifts, shoulder press, bench press, pull-ups, bent over rows, all the good stuff, squats, and it really showed on my physique from eating my diet, which consisted of about 4,000 calories a day. I trained 4 to 5 days a week and bulked from 72 kgs to 86 kgs within the space of 3 months from eating this very high calorie diet and training the way I was. I could not believe it. I finally felt like I was getting big. And it was an incredible feeling because honestly my whole life I'd always just felt so small. So my diet when I was doing this, it was dirty. I'm going to tell you guys right now. I'd have a shake in the morning, 3 eggs, milk, 2 scoops of protein and ice cream. My snacks throughout the day, lots of peanut butter on rice cakes. My lunch was a whole can of baked beans, 4 eggs, 4 pieces of bacon, 2 pieces of toast every single day. My dinner, maybe some steak and rice or some butter chicken, just anything. And then I'd have that exact same shake again right before bed after I'd train at the gym. 3 eggs, milk, 2 scoops of protein and ice cream. And I literally did this for 3 months. And I'm honestly surprised that I looked the way I did. These photos right here that you're seeing is literally me at 86 kgs when I made all these gains. So obviously my metabolism wasn't bad and I wasn't putting on an extreme amount of fat, but it's pretty crazy to think I was eating that much. It was halfway through this year that I discovered Ziz, and I immediately wanted to look like this guy. You know what? I didn't even want to look like him. I wanted to be like him. It was at this time where social media personalities didn't exist. He was an extremely rare phenomenon. Honestly guys, this was so far back that the world was so different to what it is now. So unfortunately, just after discovering Ziz, I actually realized he had died 3 weeks previous, and this was like a massive blow to me. I really fucked with this guy, man. Like, just something about him just really resonated with me. The fact that he didn't give a fuck about what anyone thought about him, and he genuinely didn't give a fuck. It was just mind-blowing. Like, coming from New Zealand, everyone cares about what everyone else is doing. Back in these days as well, this was before your mum took a fucking selfie. This is before you took a video of your dogs and put them on Facebook. This was literally a different time. A completely different time. Even me, like, taking these photos of myself on my laptop, this was top secret stuff. guys. These physique checks, top secret stuff. So anyway, like I said, I was really upset that Ziz was dead. But regardless, every day I'd watch his videos and I'd learn more and more about him over the coming months. And it really inspired me to look at life a lot differently at this point. So it was actually towards the end of this year that I started my first ever shred. And it was actually at the end of this year that I traveled over to Sydney for a working holiday to stay with my brother who had a place over there. I just worked part-time promotional work, so I had so much time to really just learn a lot about myself. I read a lot of books, you know, I started to really open my eyes to life and society and just really delve deep under the surface of what I'd been presented my whole life. And it was just mind-blowing stuff, really. I dieted as best as I could. This was before the days of even knowing about macros. I was literally just eating your stereotype meals, you know, chicken, broccoli, cans of tuna. I didn't realize about fat content or anything like that, so I was actually eating cans of tuna that were just fully in oil because I just didn't know any better. So I kind of half got shredded this summer. As you can see in these photos, my physique really did start to shape up from obviously my massive bulk the year before, and honestly, in these photos, I thought I had literally reached the epitome of aesthetics. It's kind of cringe to look back on. Without word of a lie, in these photos, I thought I was aesthetic as Ziz, and it's just so funny to look back on because I was delusional in my head. I'm pretty sure I was posting these pictures online as well. I had just started my Facebook page, the Freezma Facebook page, for which I kind of kept track of my progress online for the world to see, which is kind of strange. So I just want to point out quickly here, guys, before we move on, this photo here was the start of 2012, before I went down for my third year of university. As you can see, zooming into my nipples here, they are puffy. I never actually mentioned this. Whenever I was hot growing up, my nipples would get puffy. I went to a doctor when I was 13, and he just said it was hormonal and that it would go away as I got older. It never really did. So whenever you see my physique and my nipples don't look puffy, it's because it's either cold or I've pinched them right before I'm filming. And this is no joke. This is something that I grew up with, really self-conscious about. And as you'll later see, and as you guys know, I ended up getting gyno when I started taking steroids because my nipples were more prone to it. It is genetic, but I just thought I'd point this out real quick before we go any further. So 2012, this was my second year flatting and my third year at university. It felt really good to have kept my training up over the summer and to go into the year with momentum. And as soon as I got back to university, I started bulking up. Reasonably clean, a lot more clean than I bulked up the year before. I stopped with so much ice cream and my protein shakes. In regards to the rest of my diet, I was eating a lot of chicken, eggs, oats, protein powder, and also stir fries and rice. I was making a lot of these. So as you can see, this is my physique at the start of the year flatting. I was reasonably lean and I started to do this bulk in which I put on some really good size. I went up from sitting around 77, 78 kgs. Within a few months, I got up to 88 kgs, heavier than what I gotten up to the year before, and I felt like I was just a tiny bit leaner. And I was really excited with this newfound size. This was the first kind of point I realized that after being in more of a deficit, you know, I was shredding, but more so around maintenance, I made some really good gains just from introducing a lot more food into my diet and keeping up the training like I was. I forgot to mention I was also drinking a lot of Up and Goes when they were on special at Pack and Save. So when I was up at almost 88 kgs, my strength was the strongest I'd ever been. I was squatting 100 kgs for reps and I was deadlifting, I think 170 was my max at this point, which was a lot for me. So I was pretty much doing my sets around 140 kgs and all was well. So it was around the middle of this year that I got convinced to do a bodybuilding show. I had a few friends who were going to compete in it. Shout out to Dali Hoffman, who was probably the main guy who actually convinced me to do a show. So shout out to Dali if you're watching this. So yeah, I said fuck it, I'm just gonna do it, and I started doing my prep. I got an old friend from school who was a few years above me to write out my bodybuilding diet, and he sent me that through and I just followed it to the T, and I was doing about 45 minutes to an hour cardio every morning, and I was eating a diet that consisted of not many carbs. Looking back on it, it wasn't a very good diet, but it was definitely a starting point, and it was something that helped me get a lot more shredded than I managed to get over the summer. So the weeks went by and everything went according to plan. My body began to shape up like I'd never seen before, and I honestly just could not believe it. I was a little bit annoyed that I only had a 4-pack, but due to genetics you can't change that, and that's something that I had to learn. I learned to love my 4-pack. So as you can see in these photos here leading up to the comp, my body really started to shape up. I started to get that 3D look, even though I was a lot smaller back then. Like for me, these pumps that I was getting when I could get a good pump in the gym at this new leanness, it was just something like I'd never seen before in the mirror, and it just really motivated me and excited me. This video here, as you can see, I'm actually deadlifting 140 for reps, and I managed to keep a bit of strength up throughout this prep just due to my determination, I guess, and just sticking with these compound lifts, keeping them in my training program. I started to get leaner and leaner, and soon I was a couple weeks out from the show, and I took this selfie right here. This was the first selfie where I looked in the mirror and I just thought, holy shit, I've done it. I have become aesthetic. I just remember taking the selfie and not even being able to believe what I was seeing. I had done it. I had become aesthetic. Let's look back at me at the height of my dirty bulk. You could not tell me at this point that this was underneath all the fat, that my waist would come in this much, and it was honestly, it was just incredible. I could not even believe it. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was around this point in time, actually leading up to this NABBA Athletic show, that men's physique was just introduced as a category in the IFBB overseas, and I was following Jeff Side's journey in America of what he was doing. And around this point in time, he definitely was someone who I was looking up to in terms of their physique. I'm pretty sure I found his page when he had less than 500 followers, and I remember I'd look at his physique and it was the goal to try and look like that. And all of a sudden I took the selfie and I just remember comparing it and thinking, holy shit, like my shoulder to waist ratio isn't actually that far off his. So I was really excited about that. Obviously the rest of my body, I didn't carry as much fullness because we're not all genetically gifted like the 17-year-old Jeff was back then. But this video right here is me doing my posing practice for the show about a week out. And yeah, so here's how I'm looking the week of the show. This comparison kind of shows the bulk to the shreds, and it's quite amazing to see. I'm not too sure how lean I got, but at the time I just thought I was so shredded, and I couldn't believe it. Like I genuinely, the surprise in my voice now is literally the way I felt. Exactly to a T. I just could not believe it. So I stepped on stage, I did my first show, it was really exciting, and I can honestly say that I was just so pumped for life from this moment forward. So these photos are of me in my class, and I really was upset that I didn't win it. I genuinely thought, looking on stage and even seeing the photos afterwards, it kind of annoyed me more. I felt like I should have won, but I came third. So this photo right here, I experienced my first rebound from a comp and had amazing fullness the week after whilst keeping that same leanness, and I just looked the best I'd ever looked. So I was very happy about that. It was around the second half of the year that things changed for me. So I started importing Gold's Gym stringers into the country in bulk. I started doing this because bodybuilding was becoming a little bit more popular online. The social media things were growing. I was sitting at about 500 to 700 followers on my Freezma page, which was pretty crazy back then, I thought. And I started selling these singlets out to my followers, and it wasn't long before the demand kind of really started to grow, and I actually started making a bit of money, which was incredible. So I kind of pulled out of my uni course that I was doing. I was doing a PE certificate, and I moved back up to Auckland, where I decided to run my business in the second half of the year whilst also doing more shows. I did my first ever men's physique comp, which was the Waikato show. I didn't place at all, and that was okay. I did my first ever photo shoot where I was really impressed with how I was looking, how the images turned out. Honestly guys, this was like a dream for me, like this whole sequence of events. I have forever wanted to look like this, and finally I was, and it was really overwhelming. Back then there wasn't this whole crazy like social media thing where this was all normalized. It was really subculture. Having a physique like this wasn't normalized. If you saw someone with a good body, it was like, whoa, holy shit. Nowadays, social media has a huge influence. Everyone is in the gym, training, just trying to keep up their whole social image. Back then, it wasn't really like that. So I'm happy that I got in shape when I did, because I was kind of one of the first guys when social media started to pop off in New Zealand to have, you know, a physique with a following. So towards the end of the year, I actually drove up to Whangarei and competed in one of the last NZIFEB shows of the year. I did men's physique, but I figured I'd do the 70 to 80 kg bodybuilding competition as well. My stage weight, I would have been about 75 kgs here. As you can see my back there, a massive strength of mine. And I'll put this down a lot to rowing and also doing a lot of heavy deadlifts. Deadlifts were a huge part of my training back then. So I actually managed to place third in the show, which I was really happy about. You can see me there on the left in the lineup. So the left half of us were the top 3 there. So I was pretty happy with that, and that actually qualified me for the nationals next year, because this was technically, even though it was in the year 2012, this was the first show of the 2013 season. It was this qualification which saved me and got me to nationals to be able to put on the performance like I did, which I'm going to show you very soon. So I was living in Auckland at the stage. Shout out to my friend Tessa and her family. She was an old friend from school, and her family were so hospitable. I almost struggle with that. They were so hospitable to me because I lived out in Tuakau, but I wanted to be in Auckland where I could be a bit more motivated, more of my friends were, and I could kind of train at better gyms as well. So I pretty much trained all summer and kept importing the singlets and selling them. It was towards the end of the year also that I got in contact with some better manufacturers who actually had proper printing licenses for the Gold's Gym stringers. So I was actually getting them legit, and I was getting some really good quality ones with some of the official printers, because the initial ones that I was originally getting, as much as I kind of convinced myself they were legit, it's pretty clear looking back now that they weren't, but I didn't really know any better back then. So over the summer I actually got a job at Movenpick. In terms of my diet, I was just lean bulking and did like a mini shred for summer. The reason I actually got this job at Movenpick was just so I could get a loan from the bank to get a car, because I didn't have a car because I sold my other car in Dunedin. And this is the car that I got, a BMW 323 Ci Coupe. This thing was absolutely awesome, but I regret taking the loan out on it because it gave me a lot of troubles, and I ended up having to sell it, and then I still had the loan because I didn't get much money for the car the next year, which was a bit shit. So anyway, the majority of my summer was spent training, and that was about that. This was about as lean as I got leading up to New Year's. So coming into the year 2013, I start lean bulking, and I just want to say, guys, even this photo right here, at this point in my life, I don't even know what a steroid is. I don't know how to get steroids. I don't know that other people are on steroids. I am literally so oblivious to anything regarding that kind of part of the industry. I don't want you guys to look at these photos and think like, oh, he just hasn't told us. It's like, at this point in my life, this video is 100% honest. I've got nothing to lose. I'm completely opening up about anything to do with steroids, but at this point in my life I can honestly say that I am not anywhere near touching anything at all. I'm sitting here about 84 kgs, reasonably lean from a rebound from my shows that I did. And that's one thing I want you guys to get from this video. You can build a great physique naturally. It's crazy nowadays. Literally people think you can't even build a physique without jumping on gear, and that is so far from the truth. But stick around anyway, and I'm going to open up about when I did touch steroids for the first time. So at the start of 2013, I was still importing Gold's Gym singlets. I moved out to Tuakau with my family, and I started training out there. I trained for the Auckland Champ men's physique show, in which I competed. I don't think I placed, but again, I looked the best I'd ever looked. My physique was just kind of going to new levels, I guess. If you look at me without a pump, you can see my chest is just, I've got really bad insertions, and it just doesn't seem to fall out unless I can really get a carb up done correctly and get a pump simultaneously. My chest won't fall out, and that's something I've had to deal with my whole kind of fitness career, I guess you could say. This video here, I remember taking this and thinking like, holy shit, like I'm actually aesthetic. This was right before my Auckland Champs show, which I did, and I did not place in the show, unfortunately, but yeah, this is how I was looking for that. It was around this time of the year that I actually started up Gymstees. Right here, this is the first Gymstees stringer that was ever made, and I was just so happy to be able to be starting something of my own. I ventured away from the Gold's Gym singlets. I realized I didn't want to be selling another brand. I wanted to make my own thing. I wanted to bring something into the market that was new. So I bought in these pocket stringers, and it wasn't long before they started to do really well. And that wasn't without any lack of effort on my part. I put a lot of work into promoting and just doing everything I could to really get the business up and running, which included a $2,000 ad spend budget with Facebook, in which I targeted Australia and Europe because I wanted Gymsteez to look like it was an overseas company. I knew that if I could get it big overseas, New Zealanders would catch on. I didn't want to look all homegrown. I wanted people to really think that this was an Australian business, and I successfully did that. So I did the Auckland Champ Show, I had Gymsteez up and running, and I decided to move back into Auckland where I flattered with some friends from school. I did my first ever NZ Fitness Expo and it was amazing. I got to meet Steve Cook. He came over, he really liked the gears, and I was just on cloud nine. I couldn't believe it. I was meeting another one of my idols, and he came over asking me for free Gymsteez. He came over to the booth, he said, I really like your stuff. I'm going to be doing these videos for bodybuilding.com. Would you want to look after me with some gear and I'll wear it in the videos? And I just couldn't believe it. I was like, this is Steve Cook. You don't even have to wear it in the videos. Like, I'm going to give you it for free because you're Steve Cook. And it's just so crazy to think like that was a time in my life and this actually happened. It was just crazy. Like, he was following me on Instagram and everything, and for whatever reason he stopped following me. But Steve, if you're watching this, I still love you, bro. But I was actually pretty cut up. I don't know why he stopped following me, but I kind of do know, because I used to be a bit of a controversial guy with what I'd post. I was pretty like raw, and I think I got misinterpreted a lot because, I don't know, I feel like I was kind of angry at the world. After the Auckland show, I bulked up for a bit, and if you guys can look at this video here, I look fucking massive. I don't know if it's the camera lens or what. Like I said again, this is well before any form of steroid use or anything, so guys, don't think you can't get big without taking steroids. So around the time of the NZ Fitness Expo, I was back on the shreds and I had my eyes on doing the show that I did the year before, my first ever one, the NABA athletic category. And I wanted to go back down to Dunedin and just see all my friends from uni because I missed them, and also do the show which I had come third in last year and hopefully win it this year. It's funny as well because I can't even remember if I actually placed in that show or not. For some reason that show doesn't really hold much value in my memory, because that year all the other shows in it were just so much more overwhelming. I can tell you one show that I did do was a few weeks earlier than the NABA show, and it was a last minute decision to do an Auckland show, which was a men's physique IFBB show. So this was actually my fourth men's physique show that I ever did, and once again I looked the best that I'd ever looked. And this was like a couple of weeks before my NABA show, so I shouldn't have even been ready to get on stage, but I just decided to do it for the experience because I was qualified for nationals at the end of the year, and I knew that the experience would help me. I'd be able to practice my posing more, and this is pretty much how I looked on that show day. I think it was about 3 weeks before my NABA show, so I shouldn't have technically even been in shape to do the show, but I just jumped on stage and did it. And here's how I was looking in my bedroom with the tan. As you can see, pretty aesthetic. And yeah, so this is me training at City Fitness. That's where I used to train in Newmarket. Shout out to everyone who trains there. As you can see, as I leaned up, I just started to really look the best that I'd ever look. Aesthetic, and I had good fullness when I got my pumps, which was a nice change from the year before. I could never really get good pumps the year before, but I guess this year, after my body was so used to being at a lower body fat percentage, my metabolism began to change and I began to train more efficiently. So these are the last clips of footage I have from before I went and did my NABA show. As you can see, I was looking pretty damn good. Again, 100% natural. Had never touched anything at this point in my life, not even clean. This is what my diet actually looks like around the time. So these were two main lunch and dinner meals that I'd have. The salmon with the almonds and the low-fat cottage cheese, and then the chicken and the sweet potato and broccoli with the low-fat cottage cheese also. So I went down and I did the NABA show. This was how my body was looking. I was pretty damn diced, but lacking a bit of fullness. This was the night before the show, so I just got my tan, and my carb up I hadn't really done efficiently. I came in really flat for the show, but I was still the most lean I'd ever been, so I was pretty happy with that. So then I got back from the NABA show and I was about 5.5 weeks out from IFBB Men's Physique Nationals, and I decided that I needed to step things up and really shred up. So these photos right here are the last photos. I guess I can actually technically claim natural, because from this point forward I started using a drug called Winstrol, and I started using Clen for the first time ever in my life due to the recommendation of friends. At the time I didn't know that Winstrol was actually a steroid. I just thought it was like Clen as well, which I had researched, which wasn't a steroid. So I just figured it was another substance to help fat burning. So from this point forward I started to do a lot of cardio. I bumped my cardio up to an hour every morning, and I really depleted. I completely cut 500 calories off my daily diet. And with all of this in combination, I'd already just done a show, I was already comp ready, and then I chucked on the Clen and the Winstrol. My body really started to change, and it was amazing because I didn't realize it at the time, but I was still getting really good pumps, and I think this was due to the Winstrol. It definitely did play a part in keeping my physique full for the deficit that I was on. It didn't make the prep any easier. If anything, this was the hardest prep I'd ever done in my life. I remember crying some nights because I was so hungry in bed at 2 a.m. in the morning. I physically couldn't sleep. I lost a lot of brain function this whole prep. This footage that you're seeing right now, I look insanely awesome, but mentally I just wasn't all there because I was always just so exhausted. There were points where I was just really peaked from training and my excitement to building up to training every day. Training was the most important thing, the most exciting thing to me, which I looked forward to. These clips kind of glamorize what being in this kind of shape really is like, because it was actually fucking horrible, but it's just crazy to look back and see myself in this crazy shape. My following started to really grow because people started to take me seriously. When my physique looked like this, people were like, holy shit, like you couldn't deny that at this point I had one of the best, most aesthetic physiques in the whole country, and it was something that I was very proud of, and I still am. And the thing was as well, like for so much of my life, even leading up to these years, it was always my dream to get in that kind of shape. So realistically, I've been working for like 8 years, training from when I first started doing my standing calf raises at 13 years old. You know, it all led up to this kind of year of when it was my time to really shine. So after an extremely depleting and tiring month, I rocked up to the Nationals. This was the day before I was posing. As you can see, like I said with my chest insertions, you can really see the example here. My chest looked very flat and small, but this was because I was completely flat and had no pump. Because I was so lean, I was able to manipulate my carbs the next day and just fill the fuck out for the show, and it just gave me the illusion of what you can see right here, and that's me with a big full chest right on that stage. And it was just incredible. Everything just came together and I just looked like that. And honestly, here's some pictures of me in the lineup. I didn't even place top 5 that year. I thought personally that I should have won the whole show. I couldn't believe that I came 6th, but when it comes to the bodybuilding stuff, it gets really political, and that's something that anyone, especially involved in the NZIFBB, will tell you. So all of a sudden, Nationals is over. This whole time leading up to that show, I was on, I think, about 1650 calories for the month leading up to it. So the week after, I just went ballistic and just ate as much food as I possibly could. And these clips right here are me training 1 week after the Nationals, and what you can see is just fucking incredible. I actually look like I've run a huge cycle of something, because I look at these clips till this day and I just can't even fathom how fucking huge and full and shredded I was. It's just absolutely crazy. So obviously after the Nationals, I stopped taking the Clen, I stopped taking the Winstrol. And in my head at this point as well, I thought I was completely natural, because like I said, I had no idea that Winstrol was even a steroid. It wasn't until the year after that I found out, and I was pretty upset about that. Would it have made me not take it leading up to the show? I'm not too sure. There was that competitive side of me that obviously wanted to do well at the Nationals and be competitive with everyone, so maybe I would have, maybe I wouldn't have, who knows. But back to the end of 2013, I just continued to train and got pretty damn massive from my rebounds, and I moved into an apartment all by myself in Auckland. So it was a 2-bedroom place. I think I was paying $410 a week. Gymsties was pumping, and I started to work on a member section for my website, which I put a lot of my training videos and all that kind of exclusive like almost what I do with vlogs now, how I put them out publicly on YouTube. Back then I had a members section where I put out a lot of personal videos. So I got a squat rack around Christmas time and I put it on my deck, and I had these 6 sessions outside in the sun, and it was just good times. I was making gains. I was living by myself. It was kind of crazy because I was only, I think 22 years old at this point. And I have to say that from rebounding from this comp, I got the heaviest I'd ever been, which was 90 kgs, as you can see in these photos. This was the leanest I ever was, at around 90 kgs. So around Christmas and New Year's I did nothing crazy. I just stayed around the flat and I worked really hard. My work ethic was second to none, and I was just working on making content for my members section, growing gym stees, and it was all happening. I can tell you I put a lot of effort into my members section on my website, and within a couple of months I actually had a few hundred members, which was paying me about $2,000 passive income each month, which was very cool. It's crazy to think, like, back in these days I was making more money than what I make now, I'm pretty sure. So it's kind of funny to look back on that and kind of just wonder, like, why I never really capitalized on it as much as I should have. So this was the apartment that I lived in, as you can see. So after a summer of lean bulking, I decided that I wanted to do another show. I had a show, it was the very first WBFF one in Sydney, on my radar. I decided I was never going to compete with the IFBB again because it was just so political. The shit that I started learning after that national show, just from having friends who were kind of in the circles of the head judges and all that stuff, I kind of found out what was going on. I found out how badly political it was, and I just couldn't believe it. It really disgusted me, like just the lack of any kind of ethics in the federation. And I was pretty pissed off, to be honest, with my placing from the year before those nationals. I honestly just, I mean, you guys saw what I brought, and I just worked so hard that I was just really pissed off about that. So I started getting ready for this WBFF show, and from looking at me you would have thought, holy shit, like, I would have bought the best package ever if I'd have just done things right, if I'd have done things exactly the same as I did leading up to my IFBB show the year before. But I didn't. I started prepping for the show, and my whole time prepping for the show I had people in my ear that were telling me that I should jump on gear because they had seen what I looked like at the nationals the year before, and when I told them it was only 3.5 to 4 weeks on and off Winstrol leading up to the show, they just couldn't believe that I looked the way I did with only doing that, and they actually wanted to see me if I was running some actual gear. Like I said, Winstrol, I mean, you can ask anyone who knows anything about steroids. In terms of building muscle, it's not a steroid you would take. It's just something which hardens your physique up. And that's another reason I never really came out about it. I didn't want to be considered not natural for how I look like then, when I just, honestly, I was just kind of like, you know, I built that size. All the size that I had, it was built naturally, and I didn't want people to take that away from me, and because of how hard I worked for that prep. So anyway, back to 2014, in my prep, I finally decided, I said, fuck it, I'm gonna run a cycle. So I got some test prop and test E organized. I jumped on the test E 9 weeks out from my show, 250 milligrams a week. Now this took 3 weeks to kick in. And then by the time it did, I started taking test prop. So by the time my gear kicked in, I was on it for 6 weeks leading up to the show, and it was fucked, man. Like, I tried shredding, I was in a deficit. First of all, actually, let's talk about the needles. I absolutely hated the idea of having to inject myself, and every time I did it, I was like disgusted. I hated it. I thought it was so weird, and it made me feel so uncomfortable. I got a couple of friends to help me do it at the start, but it was something I just didn't feel comfortable with. I was kind of regretting it while I was doing it. I was doing a hard shred diet, and I put on 3 kgs in 2 weeks from that period of when the test E kicked in, and I just couldn't get lean. I was just holding all this water, and I completely fucked up, and it was such a horrible few weeks leading up to that show. I felt like I wasn't good enough because I just couldn't get lean, and I thought, I don't know, I just thought something was wrong with me. But obviously at this point I had no education around steroids. I didn't really realize the power of how they can fuck you up, and it really just was a shame, because it meant that I couldn't do this WBFF show, which was the first one in Sydney. And if I could have looked half as decent as I did for the Men's Physique Nationals the year before, I really could have had a chance, I think, at winning a pro card. So, you know, that was a massive shame. So 2 weeks out from the show, I said, fuck it, this isn't gonna work, I'm not gonna get lean enough. So I started eating heaps of food. I blew up and I got fucking massive. These clips here is me walking around Sydney, sitting about 92, 93 kgs. I was an absolute unit, and it was just, I don't know, like my face got big and chunky, as you can see, and it was just a real shame, man. I was so depressed that I didn't do the show. And at this point in my life also, I had no information or no idea about PCTing. I had heard the term before, but this was kind of back in the days where there wasn't much information around this stuff. It was very subculture, and I didn't PCT, and I got depressed, and I put on a lot of body fat. I lost a lot of muscle for the 2 months after doing the cycle. Oh, I forgot to tell you as well. So the cycle was 250 milligrams of test for 6 weeks, because I started taking the test E, which takes 3 weeks to kick in, 9 weeks out. And I stopped taking that once it kicked in, and I took the test prop for 6 weeks from there. So yeah, it was about 6 to 6.5 weeks on that cycle, and it blew me up, and it was just crazy to see what it could actually do, to be honest. That was yeah, it was pretty mind-blowing. So for the next 2 months I was really depressed. I lost a lot of muscle, and it's just kind of scary because that wasn't that much gear to be taking. My hormones got all fucked up, my skin went really bad, and I just got really depressed. I moved out of my apartment, I moved back to Tuakau, and I really was in a bad spot in my life. So it was nearing towards the middle of 2014, which I had a really rough couple of months. I moved back home to Tuakau because my lease ran out, and I tried to get back into training, but my training was just so bad. I was getting no pumps in the gym. My natural testosterone had just been destroyed from doing the cycle, and I went and saw the doctor, and yeah, it was just really low, and he didn't prescribe me anything, so I had to just naturally allow my testosterone to recuperate, which it slowly did. It was around this time I started making a lot more videos for my members section and opening up more about my life like I do on my vlogs. But for my members, it wasn't as physique orientated, it wasn't as fitness orientated in my members section at this point. I decided to get motivated again and do the NZ Fitness Expo with a booth for the 2nd year running. We had a crazy booth, and it was just like, it was actually nuts. It was crazy this year because I actually had a decent following, so the lines and the people at the booth were like, it was just unreal. The year before, I think I had like 30 people know me. At this one, you know, we had a couple of hundred people coming through the booth, and it was just so awesome. It was around this time also that I'd actually moved into an office space in Pukekohe. I was actually sleeping there as well because I didn't really like going home very much. I didn't feel motivated at home. I wanted to be around my business. So after the NZ Fitness Expo, I decided I wanted to turn my life around and really get my physique back. I started a new 8-week shred. It was actually my very first Freezma 8-week shred, which I managed to get a group of people on board with me, and we all shredded for the next 8 weeks. This was my first proper time doing any coaching and diets and stuff for people, and it was just incredible the results people got doing the journey with me. So the first 4 weeks of the shred, I did it just hitting my diet, doing it naturally, and then I figured, you know what, because of the year before, I knew how good I looked when I took the Winstrol, so I said, you know what, I'm just going to do it again. So I chucked that in, and along with doing a lot of cardio. Dieting around this time was actually a lot of if it fits your macros. I pretty much starved myself during the day, just drinking protein shakes and eating cans of tuna so that I could have whatever I wanted for dinner. But at this point I had more of an understanding of my macros, and I managed to actually get lean whilst keeping my macros in check, doing it this way. As you can see here, this was in my little bedroom in the office space. I got very lean once again, and I was really surprised that I was able to come back from how I had had that massive downfall after the cycle a few months beforehand. It felt really good to be back in the shape, and again I was super motivated for life. And it was at this point where I decided to make the move to Australia. The weather in New Zealand was just really bad, and it was just so unmotivating. So I had a couple of friends that lived in the Gold Coast, and they told me I needed to be there, so I just packed everything up and I moved over to the Gold Coast. So I did a massive clearance sale on every item of Gymstees. I think we did 30 to 40% off everything site-wide, and as you can see in this clip here, just sold a hell of a lot of gym stees and had a really successful time moving the product. And then I took a couple of suitcases over filled with gym stees and got to the Gold Coast, where I stayed in the backpackers for a couple of weeks before finding an apartment to move into. So for the next 6 months living in this apartment, it was a bit of a struggle. I had a bit of money to live off, which lasted a few months, but towards the end of our lease I actually had pretty much run out of money, and I had to sell my car back in New Zealand. It was my prized possession, I forgot to mention it before. So it was around this point in time actually that I flew to Melbourne for the first ever Arnold Classic. You guys will remember the videos. I have to say also, my training and my diet and everything was on point my whole time for these first few months in Australia, and I was in the best shape of my life consistently, and it just felt amazing. These clips right here, this is me. I had not been taking anything for months. The last thing I took was the 4 weeks of Winstrol for that shred the year before, but this was me at the start of 2015. This was how I was looking. I was training hard, I was dieting hard, and I was so excited to go to the first ever Arnold Classic in Australia. I booked my flights and I just went over there with nowhere to stay. I didn't have much money, and I was fortunate enough to have a friend let me come stay with him. Chris Anastasi, shout out to you, brother, if you're watching this video. And it was that weekend that I made some really great connections. You know, I met Jeff Side, I met Chespra, I just met so many people, and it was just such an awesome weekend. So I flew back to the Gold Coast more motivated than ever after the Arnold Classic, and it was around this time that I decided I was going to go off social media, do a bit of a lean bulk, and then start shredding. It's funny, after the year before I said I'd never ever do a cycle ever again, but man, it was crazy being in Australia, training at the gyms and stuff. There was just so many big guys around, and I just felt like I was just inadequate and small, and I had just had enough. There was a couple of people I was training with in particular, and I just couldn't even stand next to them without looking so small. Even though I was in great shape, I wasn't a monster. You know, I was sitting at my natural weight, which is around 78 to 80 kgs this lean, and I just decided, like, I feel like the peer pressure really got to me, and this is when I did my first serious cycle. So I started running Test and Tren, and I think something called Masteron. This was just stuff I was recommended by a friend, and my physique started to really change. So at this point I was clearly not natural, and I actually stopped claiming natural ever on social media around this point. As you can see, I actually dieted successfully, and I looked the best I'd ever looked in my life. I was big and full and aesthetic, and I flew back to the New Zealand Fitness Expo, and I had a great time. I made some awesome videos, and it was crazy, man. I had like a line the whole weekend at the booth I was on, and it was such an awesome time. I was on the Salucor booth. I was really pissed off because I did a lot for the brands that weekend. You know, Cullen Volmoga couldn't make it back to that expo. This is one of the reasons I was so pissed off, because I had given them so much at that booth, that NZ Fitness Expo. Yeah, there would have been no one on the booth if I didn't fly back for that. So anyway, that's another story. I got back to the Gold Coast, and for whatever reason my PCT that I had organized fell through. I couldn't get the stuff in time, so I actually had 4 weeks completely off gear. And it was around this time that I heard news that the Sydney Fitness Expo was happening along with the Brisbane one, and Jeff Side and Cullen Volmoga were coming over for it. So at this point in time, I think I was about 6 weeks out from those expos, and I hadn't PCT'd for a month, and then I decided to hop back on gear because I didn't want to look small next to these guys. I wanted to be able to stand next to them and look okay. So this is when I started getting back on the Tren and the Test, and by this point my hormones had completely blown out. As you can see, I was a fucking absolute monster. But things started to happen, like my skin got bad, I started to get really puffy nipples, I got the gyno underneath, and physically for me it was just a really bad time. Don't get me wrong, I had a great time like making the videos and going to the expos and stuff like that, but it's just, I just look at these videos and it's just so, I'm just so different to what I am now, and this, I think that for me the sad thing was, it was like, the pressures of the public and the industry had got to me, and I felt like I wasn't good enough unless I was massive. And that's something I always hoped that would never happen to me, but unfortunately it did. So it was at this point, after doing the Vlog of the Gods series on my YouTube channel, that I finally came off the gear, and I did a bit of a PCT. It was a kind of a last ditch effort, but after already fucking my hormones so much, there wasn't much that I could have done. I had gyno, my skin got really bad, and it's actually amazing. This video right now, it's exactly 2 years since I took the gear. So pretty unreal. The next few months was a really hard mental battle for me. My skin started getting really bad. If you can see these photos here, you can see that my skin is really bad. I'd lost a lot of size. Again, I put on body fat just like I did after the first time I did a cycle, and I was really gutted, but I knew that I had to sleep in the bed that I made because it was all my fault. You know, I deserved everything. So unfortunately, that's where I was at mentally. It was not a good time, and it was around this point in time that I actually went to a hormone doctor and got prescribed HCG to get my natural test levels back up. My test was sitting, I think, around 6 or 7, which was extremely low, and the doctor prescribed me some HCG along with a peptide, which I actually didn't really understand what it was. I thought it worked in combination with the HCG to help raise my test. Little did I know that it was actually a separately acting agent, and it was through this period of time that I was doing the journey back to aesthetics. And I don't know if you guys can remember, but I was dieting, trying to get shredded, and I could never get lean, and it was all because of this peptide I was on. I was so ignorant as to what it was doing to my body, but it was making me hold a lot of water. I thought that it was something that worked with the HCG, and I needed to take to make the HCG work properly to get my natural test levels back up, but it turns out it wasn't, and I was kind of annoyed when I found this out. So I stopped taking the peptide. I kept taking the HCG to get my natural test levels up, and I finally leaned out. But by this time I'd gone through a whole lot of shit in my life. A breakup, I took gym stees down, I stopped posting completely on all social media, and I got back in shape off camera. I got really lean, and it was a couple months later I came back to social media with this video where I opened up about my whole steroid use and all of that. The response I got on this video was amazing. It got a lot of attention. I was getting so many messages from people who were thinking about casually taking some gear and then decided not to because of my video, which was really good. The one thing I wanted people to understand from this video was that steroids are no joke. They can fuck you up. It's just not worth it unless, I guess, you're doing it for a specific reason. And the one main thing I wanted to show people was that, hey, if you're not going to take this stuff seriously, it will fuck you up. So regardless of whether the video stops people taking steroids, or even if they still did, at least they would have a bit more awareness around it. And I guess I was the shining example of what not to do and how seriously you should really take this stuff. So I was actually really glad that I put that video out there. I also encouraged many kids who were thinking about taking gear to not do it. I was getting messages from 16 to 18-year-old kids who were really close to taking gear and they didn't because of my video, so that was something I was really proud of. So at this point for me personally, like I said, I had gotten really lean again. I did this all off camera. I just decided that I needed time for myself to get back in shape, and this is what I did. But unfortunately I still had gyno from the cycles that I did the year before, so I got in amazing shape, and then I just had this gyno on my body and I was just really unhappy about that. It really demotivated me. I was going to do a lot more training stuff on my YouTube and build a new website with online training videos and heaps of cool stuff, but my gyno was just too prominent when I was lean, so I had to make that decision to get the gyno surgery. It was around this point in time as well that I actually went homeless because I hadn't been posting for a couple of months. I had gone completely broke. I had maxed out my credit cards and I was completely fucked. I stopped advertising gym stees and working on it because I just got so depressed and annoyed at the world. I kind of went through this anti-internet phase where I was really angry as well at vlogging and people knowing so much about my life. I was in a really unhealthy mental space, and you could tell when I came back making these videos that I was just very angry. But regardless, I managed to get things back on track and push against the negativity that was in my mind and just start to really open up, and I really changed as the person. I started to realize to not take things so seriously and to just chill a bit and relax, and I became, I don't know, I kind of went through the spiritual development where I became more of the person who I am now. You guys watch my vids, you guys know I'm a lot more easygoing, laid back, don't take things so seriously, and have fun a lot more, do fun things, have better relationships with people instead of just kind of being an isolated guy, which I used to be. So yeah, from here I guess you guys know the story. I did the Rebuilding My Life series on my YouTube channel. It's not so long ago, you can go check it out. And I got my gyno surgery done where I got it removed, and that video is also on my channel. And I guess ever since I got my gyno removed, I got back into the gym just for recovery and maintenance purposes, but I had never really fallen back in love with it again like I once was. So I guess you could say for this last year since that surgery, my life has just been focused on other things. My training's still been there, but not super consistent. It's not been a priority. You guys will know from watching my vids. Maybe towards the Arnold Classic I did a little bit of a comeback, but apart from that my last year has been completely different from what I've ever really, I guess, put out online. So I guess here we are at the end of this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you can maybe learn something or get inspired from my story. In regards to the vlogs, I know you guys want these back. They're going to be back very soon on my channel, I can assure you. It's going to be either this week or next week. So I really hope that you guys can tune in for that. So I guess when I make my return to the vlogging, you're going to see what I'm going to be doing if I'm getting back in the gym. I'm going to leave it all a surprise, but I can tell you that making this video has really, it's made me really realize kind of everything I've been through and done, and like I said, I just hope it can inspire some of you guys. So make sure you give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed, and leave a comment below with what you thought. I'll be reading all the comments on this video, and once again, I just really hope that you enjoyed and could take something from it. I will see you all in the next one. It'll be a vlog, and I can't wait. Until next time, stay good in it.